Hello and welcome to High Point Music's Gear Reviews. I'm Lewis, and in today's episode I'm going to show you another envelope filter style pedal from Boss, the SYB-3. I love envelope filters, as those of you that have seen the MXR video will probably have gathered by now, and this particular pedal is pretty cool because of some of the harsher, fuzzier sounds that it makes. I am going to do a review on the SYB-5, which is the current model from Boss as well, so I thought it'd be good to show what this pedal can kind of do, and that way we can show some of the upgrades and fancier touches that the newer model has. This particular pedal has still some really cool sounds into it and a lot of good features that I really like, so I think it's relevant to kind of get a feel for what it can do to compared to the new one. So let's get into it and see what crazy and silly sounds you can make with it. I'm of course playing my jazz bass. We're running through the bass synth into the VT Bass DI from Tech 21 and then off to our recording system. I am running a completely blended signal from the VT Bass DI, so there's no signal being blended on it as such, because the SYB-3 has a blend function for its clean and wet sounds. This is what the clean sounds like. And so on and so forth. First thing I'm going to do is show that I'm just running into a single input on the SYB-3. It's a mono input, and I'm running out of the A output on the end. The SYB-3 has the option to run both a clean and a wet signal output, or to blend them together in mono. I am just running it in mono because we're just using one connection, but that's a pretty cool way straight off the bat to separate your effect signal from a dry signal, to really give your mixing engineer or your recording options a lot of breadth for being able to blend those signals. The first setting I have here via the mode switch is the Sawtooth wave function. In the Sawtooth wave function, we've got the ability to change the sensitivity and the frequency and resonance controls. I've got my clean volume turned all the way up, like so. There definitely are some cool sounds where you can have that off and just have some effect running, but I do like it a little bit of clean blend in there. The output on these pickups is reasonably low, and they're low because I've gone with a lower output to get a better frequency response. Basses that have active pickups will get a bit more grunt out of them, and you might not necessarily need it that high, so that's a choice to make when you're plugging your own bass in. So as you heard a little bit there, that was the start of the Sawtooth wave. Yeah, basically it sounds like this. It's still dynamically responsive like envelope filters are, so how hard you play is going to make a bigger difference than, say, what pickups you're using. The cutoff on this particular effect is a little bit short, so maybe you want to boost it up a little bit. I haven't done that today. If you want to see that, just drop us a comment below and I'll shoot another quick video doing so. But because you can do a blend of your wet and dry signals there, I thought it was relevant to just make a note about that. So. And when we change those sensitivity controls, you can make it a little shorter. Just kind of cool for some quicker stab lines. Of course, percussion on the strings does make a little bit of a difference there. You can get some cool effects happening with just that. As we vary that resonance and frequency, I'll turn that sensitivity back up. You get those kind of cool, not necessarily harsh, but lower frequency, sort of synthier 70s kind of sounds. I'm going to jump across to the next mode now by doing so. which takes us to a square wave style sound. Fairly similar in its fuzziness, I suppose. Like so. If we turn that decay down, or that sensitivity down rather, we get back to that really subtle kind of envelope filter style effect. If you run the dry out of that, you get that cool monophonic synthesizer-like sound. The SYB-3 doesn't necessarily track particularly well on chords. I definitely find it works better on single notes. For example, instead of playing a D or a C, which is kind of a cool effect, but single notes definitely track a little bit better, and having that clean tone blended in does make a big difference as well. So I'll run that back up to full as we've been having it in some of the others. And I'm going to jump across to the pulse width modulation option. There's a subtle change just at those settings, so let's dial the sensitivity up a bit. As I commented earlier, playing multiple notes at once doesn't help the SYB-3 to track very much. So a good thing to keep your mind on is muting strings when you've stopped playing them. Obviously, it's when that envelope starts to filter through, if you change notes and you don't play with a lot of attack, it can get a little bit muddled up and it might sound like you're playing the wrong note, so be strong and be bold. I'm just changing the resonance and frequency filters here, and I've cut it just after the last take because in this particular setting, that pulse width modulation mode creates a very high frequency effect. And as a word of warning from me to you, don't set your volume on this particular setting with a volume too high, because you'll kill blue whales off the coast of Australia in about 3/4 of a second, because it does this. Which sounds cool, but at pretty much any higher amount of effects mix than that, that's tearing holes in eardrums, so just be careful of that one. But pretty cool if you're doing some science fiction-y kind of sounds or some soundscape work. Kind of reminds me of the Doctor Who theme. That super science fiction kind of sound again. I'm going to move on from there because that's a fairly specific choice of effect, and we're going to go to the Sawtooth with 1 octave lower than our primary note and just dial that back. And for comparison, let's pull our dry out. Which is super cool. If you were adding some reverb or some delay to that effect, you're going to have an amazing soundscape-like sounds. And it's a really great way to take the bass guitar from that rhythmic thumping device to a very, maybe smooth is not the right word, but to a very free and cruisy kind of longer note style sound. Our dry back in. So while we're on that minus octave or that 1 octave down Sawtooth, I'll just vary this EQ and frequency and resonance controls. Turn my effect down a little bit so not to kill anyone. Which is pretty cool. So just with that volume effect, or the wet effect volume turned down. Which is pretty cool. And then we'll jump along to the next setting, which is a noise-like effect. Kind of similar to the previous setting. Let's pull that resonance down. Which has some cool sounds to it. Fuzzier, more distorted like kind of sounds as you dial that control up. Like that. The next is another noise setting, which is an octave below. Which again screams like 70s, 80s science fiction kind of sounds to me. And of course, varying that sensitivity there really sharpens that time that it takes to transition. So you get those really quick stabs as well. And let's jump along to the next mode, which are the wave shape modes. This is an upwards moving version. As we adjust those resonance and frequency filters. We get some pretty cool sounds there too. The second mode is the similar style effect, but it moves down instead of up. I'm going to just dial that resonance back a little bit. So a lot more of a fuzzy-like sound. You can definitely shorten that up and change your effect mix to get a pretty cool sound. This is the second wave shape mode, very similar to the previous one, except it moves in a different direction. Which has a cool distorted-like effect to it if we turn our dry volume all the way down. We get some pretty cool sounds coming from it like that. I'd probably still use it with the clean blend mixed in. just because it adds a lot of power having your dry signal there, and when it's just the effect signal, it definitely has some great options and great uses, but you lose a lot of the attack and sort of prowess that a bass guitar usually carries, so that's a good one to keep in mind. So the last two modes are a touch wah or a more traditional envelope filter. I don't find that these particular modes on the SYB-3 anywhere near as sensitive as what I've found on, say, the MXR envelope filter, but if you've got an active bass or you're playing with a pick, it really makes a big difference to that. For example, when you play pretty hard on this, you get that envelope-like filter effect, but it's nowhere near as much movement as a traditional envelope filter effect. And that's why I would probably have this on my pedal board with some of the crazier Sawtooth settings, and the MXR version on my pedal board doing specifically that sound. It does sound good when you play that hard and you get a bit of rhythm going. So I'll show you the next mode and you can hear what it sounds like for yourself. Has a quick movement to it. When you dial that sensitivity control down, you do get less of that effect. You can kind of hear it whistling away there as the frequency changes. But it's significantly more subtle than the traditional MXR style envelope filter that I mentioned earlier. If we dial those resonances down a little bit, still get that little bit of movement. It's significantly more subtle, which would be great for running into a fuzz or a distortion. You're not going to get too much movement, and it definitely brings in that just a little bit of something that's maybe not going to make you sound funky per se, but would be great for other styles of music where you're trying to get just a little bit of color and tonal change to your sounds. Which brings us to the last of the effect modes. The other cool option to consider with something like this is when you go to, let's grab something that's not going to destroy our ears. It has a hold mode. So basically you play a note, and then when you take your hand off the guitar or you have that button to press down, it's going to carry that note through and allow you to play over the top of it. So that's pretty cool if you're doing some droney kind of sounds or some synth kind of sounds, but it does only work on the first 7 of those modes, and a pretty cool option for, as I said, noise, instrumental kind of stuff, or maybe some pop stuff where you just want to hold that one note out and leave the effect ring, because as I mentioned earlier, the effect transition on this is a little bit short, so that's a great way to bring that sustain up and let it ring out. So that's the SYB-3 from Boss. Again, they make an SYB-5, which is why I wanted to show you this. So we'll do the SYB-5 in a couple of weeks. But that gives you an idea of what this version does, which will be a good comparison to what the new version does. And yeah, take us down that journey of sort of making cool, weird sounds with the bass guitar and having more fun when you're playing, which is definitely a good thing. If you're interested in checking something like this out, we'll have a link below to some comparable style pedals. And if you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to give us a like, a share, a thumbs up, a comment. If there's anything in this particular pedal or the SYB-5 that you think you might like to see, don't forget to let us know as well. Head over to the blog to check out a little bit more specific information about some of the settings on this pedal. And of course, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.